Your soulmate has hidden something very important from you, and it's this, and the universe did not bring you here by accident to read these words right now, because there is a truth sitting heavy in their chest that has been trying to surface for a long time, a truth they convinced themselves they were protecting you from, but in reality they were protecting themselves from the fear of losing you, because what they have been hiding is not a lie about another person, not a secret plan, not something small or temporary, but a deep emotional truth about how intensely, how uncontrollably, how painfully connected they are to you, a connection that scared them the moment they realized it was real, because your soulmate reached a point where they knew that once you truly saw the depth of their feelings, nothing would ever be casual again, nothing would ever be half-hearted again. And they were not sure if they were ready to be that vulnerable, that exposed, that seen, so instead they chose silence, distance, distraction, pretending to be fine, pretending to be strong, pretending they had moved on, while every night their thoughts kept circling back to you like a loop they could not escape, replaying conversations, replaying moments, replaying things they never said out loud. Because what they hid from you was the fact that you changed them in a way they cannot undo. You shifted something inside their soul that no one else has been able to touch, and that terrified them more than losing you ever could, because loving you made them realize how much they had been surviving instead of living before you entered their life, and once that realization hit, they panicked, because they knew they were not healed enough, not stable enough, not brave enough to show up as the version of themselves you deserve, so they hid the truth behind excuses, timing, confusion, mixed signals, and emotional walls, hoping that if they stayed quiet long enough the feelings would fade, but they didn't. They only grew stronger, heavier, more demanding, until it reached a point where their soul itself started rebelling against the mask they were wearing, sending them signs, dreams, sudden emotional waves, moments of regret that hit them out of nowhere, because the hidden truth is that your soulmate knows, deep down, that you are not just someone they met, you are someone they were meant to grow into. And that realization came with responsibility, with accountability, with the need to change patterns they were comfortable hiding behind. And instead of facing that immediately, they froze, they delayed, they disappeared emotionally, not because they didn't care, but because they cared too much and didn't trust themselves not to ruin something sacred, so they chose distance as a form of control, thinking that if they kept you at arm's length they could manage the intensity of what they feel. But what they didn't realize is that souls don't listen to logic, and bonds written beyond time don't dissolve just because someone is afraid, and right now, as you are reading this, your soulmate is standing at a crossroads internally, because the weight of what they've hidden is becoming unbearable, and the universe is applying pressure, nudging them, confronting them with the truth that hiding love does not protect anyone, it only delays destiny, and what they are hiding is the confession they practice in their head. The apology they haven't said yet, the truth they want to tell you about why they pulled away, why they hesitated, why they acted unsure when their heart was screaming certainty, and the reason this message has found you now is because the silence is reaching its expiration date, the hidden truth is about to surface, whether through words, actions, or a sudden shift you will feel before you even hear it. Because when a soulmate hides something this big, the universe doesn't let it stay buried forever, and very soon you will notice the cracks in their composure, the emotional leakage, the signs that they can no longer pretend you don't matter the way you do, because what they hid was never the absence of love, it was the depth of it, and once that depth is revealed, everything between you changes, permanently. And as this truth keeps rising inside your soulmate, it's no longer Something they can ignore or bury under distractions, because the more they tried to suppress it, the louder it became, turning into restlessness, sleepless nights, sudden mood shifts, moments where their chest felt tight for no logical reason, because the secret they hid from you was never meant to stay hidden for this long. It was only delayed until they were forced to face themselves. And now they are realizing that hiding this truth cost them more than revealing it ever could, because every day they stayed silent, a part of them felt incomplete, like they were betraying not just you, but their own soul. And the truth is, they knew exactly when they fell for you. They remember the exact moment, the shift in energy, the feeling that this connection was different, deeper, dangerous in the most beautiful way, and instead of leaning into it, they questioned it, analyzed it, doubted it. Because they were taught that love should be controlled, measured, logical, not overwhelming and soul shaking like what they felt with you, so they told themselves stories to feel safe, that maybe it was timing, maybe it was attachment, maybe it would pass, but it didn't pass. It rooted itself deeper, and now every attempt to move forward without you feels forced, heavy, wrong, because what they hid from you was also the truth that no one else compares. No connection feels the same, no conversation flows the way it did with you. And even when they are surrounded by people, there's a loneliness that only your presence ever knew how to dissolve. And this realization has started breaking the illusion they were living in, because the universe has a way of removing comfort from places that no longer align with truth, and your soulmate is feeling that discomfort now, feeling the pressure to stop running, to stop pretending, to stop acting like what you shared was ordinary, because it wasn't. It was catalytic. It was awakening. It forced them to see parts of themselves they had avoided for years, and that's why they pulled back, because growth scares people who were surviving in familiarity, and loving you meant stepping into accountability, emotional maturity, vulnerability, and the courage to choose something real over something easy. And they weren't ready then. But readiness doesn't mean the feeling disappears, it just waits, and now it's waiting at the door of their consciousness, demanding to be acknowledged. And the truth they hid is also the regret they carry for not choosing honesty sooner, for letting fear dictate their actions, for allowing pride and self-doubt to delay something that felt destined. And they replay scenarios in their head constantly, imagining how things could have unfolded if they had just spoken, just trusted, just taken the risk, because deep down they know that the pain of potential loss is nothing compared to the pain of never trying. And this realization is slowly dismantling the walls they built, because walls that once felt protective now feel suffocating. And what scares them most now is not opening up, but the idea that they might lose the chance forever if they don't, because silence has a shelf life, and the universe does not pause timelines for people who hesitate too long. And your soulmate is sensing that time is moving, shifts are happening, choices are being made on an energetic level, and they feel the urgency, the internal push, the unignorable nudge that says this truth must come out now, not later, not someday, but soon. And you might already feel it too, that subtle energetic pull, the sudden thoughts of them, the emotional waves that seem to come out of nowhere, the sense that something is aligning behind the scenes, because when two souls are connected this deeply, distance does not dissolve the bond. It only stretches it until it snaps back with greater force, and the hidden truth is preparing to surface through action, confession, or a shift so obvious that words won't even be needed, because once they stop hiding, everything changes, the dynamic, the energy, the trajectory. And the universe did not bring you this far to leave the story unfinished. It brought you here because what was hidden is ready to be revealed. And when it is, you will finally understand that the distance, the silence, the confusion were never about lack of love, they were about fear of depth, and depth is something this connection was always meant to explore, no matter how long it took to get there, and now your soulmate is reaching a moment where running no longer feels like an option, because the truth they buried has started reshaping their reality in ways they cannot control anymore, and every distraction that once helped them avoid their emotions is slowly losing its power, because the universe has begun placing reminders of you in the most unexpected ways, through songs that suddenly hit too close to home, through dreams where your presence feels more real than their waking life, through random memories surfacing at the quietest moments, and these signs are not coincidences but gentle spiritual confrontations, forcing them to face the emotional mirror they have been avoiding, and what they are realizing now is heavier than anything they imagined, because the secret they hid from you was never just about love, it was about how deeply you triggered their transformation, how your presence exposed wounds they thought were healed, how your connection illuminated fears they had successfully hidden even from themselves, and instead of seeing that as an opportunity to grow together, they initially saw it as a threat to the identity they were comfortable living in, because loving you demanded authenticity, and authenticity meant tearing down the false strength they had built around their heart, and they didn't know how to exist without that armor, so they convinced themselves that stepping back was necessary, that distancing themselves was maturity, that silence was protection, but what they didn't understand at the time is that soul connections do not disappear when ignored, they evolve in silence, they grow roots in unseen dimensions, and now those roots have grown so deep inside their emotional world that trying to deny you feels like denying a part of their own existence. And this realization is shaking them, because they are starting to understand that the truth they hid was also the truth they needed the most, that you were never just someone they loved, you were someone who awakened their purpose to become emotionally honest, spiritually aware, and courageously vulnerable, and this awakening is arriving now like a storm they cannot escape, because they are feeling waves of guilt, waves of longing, waves of clarity hitting them one after another, showing them the moments they chose fear instead of trust, the times they held back words that could have changed everything, the nights they almost reached out but stopped themselves at the last second, and these memories are not haunting them to punish them, they are rising to prepare them, to push them toward the decision they can no longer postpone, because the universe is aligning circumstances around them that make avoidance impossible, situations where they are forced to reflect, forced to feel, forced to admit that no matter how far they tried to move, their heart kept tracing the same path back to you, and what terrifies them now is not the intensity of their feelings, but the possibility that you might have built walls of your own during their silence, that you might have convinced yourself to move on, that you might not be standing emotionally where you once were, and this fear is becoming the final test for their courage, because revealing what they hid means risking rejection, risking vulnerability, risking exposure of every emotion they once buried, and yet, despite that fear, their soul is reaching a point where staying silent feels more painful than speaking, because suppressed love turns into emotional weight that no one can carry forever, and your soulmate is feeling that weight pressing against their chest, urging them toward honesty, urging them toward action, urging them toward the realization that destiny does not wait for perfect timing, it waits for brave hearts. And what they hid from you is now transforming into the very truth that will push them toward you again, because they are beginning to understand that love like this is rare, once in a lifetime rare, the kind that does not arrive twice in the same form, and the universe is reminding them of that through the emptiness they feel when they imagine a future where you are not part of their story, because every scenario they create without you feels incomplete, colorless, lacking the emotional depth they experienced with you, and this clarity is dissolving the excuses they once held onto, showing them that fear of losing you was never a valid reason to distance themselves, because distance itself risked losing you even more, and now they are standing emotionally exposed before their own truth, realizing that the strongest thing they can do is admit how deeply you impacted them, how profoundly you changed their understanding of love, how permanently you left a mark on their soul. And this realization is not arriving quietly, it is arriving with emotional intensity, with moments where they feel overwhelming urges to reconnect, overwhelming desires to confess everything they hid, overwhelming clarity that tells them you were never meant to be a chapter they closed, but a story they paused out of fear, and pauses are temporary when souls are tied by something greater than circumstance. And as this internal shift continues building inside them, you may begin sensing energetic changes yourself, subtle emotional signals, sudden memories resurfacing, feelings that seem connected to them even without communication, because soul connections operate beyond physical presence, and when one soul begins awakening to truth, the other often feels the ripple effect, and right now that ripple is growing stronger, building momentum, preparing both of you for a moment of emotional revelation that cannot be avoided much longer, because what they hid is reaching the surface of their reality, and once it emerges, it will not come out halfway, it will come out fully, honestly, and intensely, because truths buried in fear always return with the force of destiny, and when that moment arrives, you will finally understand that their silence was never the absence of love, it was the fear of loving you so deeply that it would change their entire life. And now they are standing at the edge of that life-changing realization, feeling the pull of their soul guiding them back toward the truth they can no longer hide, and as this energy continues unfolding, the universe is quietly aligning paths, timing, and emotional readiness, ensuring that when this hidden truth is finally spoken, it will not just reveal their feelings, it will reveal the purpose behind every delay, every silence, every emotional distance that once felt confusing but was secretly preparing both of you for a love that demands honesty, courage, and spiritual growth, and your soulmate is now realizing that this connection was never meant to be easy, it was meant to be real, and real love always demands truth, no matter how long it takes for that truth to rise to the surface, and as this inner storm intensifies, your soulmate is beginning to understand something that once felt impossible to accept, that the reason this connection never faded, no matter how much distance, time, or silence was placed between you, is because it was never operating on surface-level emotion, it was operating on soul recognition, the kind that doesn't ask permission, the kind that doesn't disappear just because circumstances change, and this realization is hitting them slowly but relentlessly, like waves eroding a wall they spent years building, because every layer of denial they peel away reveals the same truth underneath, that you were not a coincidence in their life, you were a catalyst. And catalysts don't come to make people comfortable, they come to trigger transformation, and what they hid from you was how deeply unprepared they felt to meet the version of themselves that loving you demanded, because loving you required them to confront their patterns of avoidance, their fear of emotional dependency, their habit of retreating the moment something became too real, and instead of admitting that vulnerability to you, they hid behind confusion, mixed signals, and emotional distance, believing that keeping control meant keeping safety, but now they are realizing that control was the very thing keeping them trapped, because the more they tried to manage their feelings, the more those feelings began managing them, showing up in their dreams, influencing their decisions, affecting their mood, shaping their perception of relationships that followed, because no matter who stood in front of them, a part of their heart kept comparing, kept searching, kept measuring against the depth they once felt with you, and that comparison always ended the same way, with emptiness, with dissatisfaction, with the quiet knowing that something essential was missing, and this awareness has now matured into something heavier, something unavoidable, because they are starting to feel the consequences of silence, the weight of what could have been said but wasn't, the timelines that could have aligned but didn't, and this weight is not punishment, it's preparation, because souls are not confronted with truth until they are strong enough to carry it, and your soulmate is reaching that strength now, slowly, painfully, honestly, realizing that the truth they hid was also the truth that could have freed both of you much earlier, and this realization is breaking them open emotionally, causing moments of deep reflection where they ask themselves why fear was allowed to sit in the driver's seat for so long, why love was treated like a threat instead of a gift, and why they believed they had more time than destiny actually gives, because destiny does not move in endless circles, it moves in windows, and they are beginning to sense that a window is opening again, but not indefinitely. And this sense of urgency is awakening something fierce inside them, a determination to stop living half-truths, to stop postponing honesty, to stop assuming that silence is neutral when it is often the loudest decision of all, and what scares them now is not expressing their feelings, but realizing how close they came to losing the chance to express them at all, because in the quiet moments they imagine you moving forward, choosing peace, choosing stability, choosing someone who shows up without hesitation, and that image hits them with a clarity sharper than regret, because they understand that love that is not claimed eventually finds somewhere else to belong, and this understanding is forcing them to confront the possibility that destiny does not guarantee reunion if growth is delayed too long, and that awareness is pushing them out of emotional paralysis into emotional action, because the truth they hid is no longer content being hidden, it wants movement, it wants voice, it wants embodiment, and as this internal shift accelerates, your soulmate is shedding old beliefs about timing, about readiness, about perfection, realizing that love does not wait for people to be fully healed, it waits for people to be honest about where they are. And this honesty is beginning to form inside them like a confession waiting for breath, a message waiting for courage, a moment waiting for alignment, and whether it comes through words, through actions, or through a sudden re-entry into your life, the energy is already moving, rearranging circumstances, nudging paths closer, dissolving barriers that once felt permanent, because when a soul finally stops hiding from its truth, the universe responds quickly, removing obstacles that were only held in place by fear, and you may already feel this shift on your end, a strange calm mixed with anticipation, a sense that something unresolved is circling back for closure or continuation, because soul connections do not return to repeat pain, they return to test growth, and what is approaching now is not the same version of the story, it is a higher-level conversation, one built on lessons learned through distance, silence, and longing, and your soulmate is understanding that if they step forward now, they must do so differently, with clarity instead of confusion, with presence instead of avoidance, with truth instead of half-explanations, because you are no longer the person you were when they first pulled away, and they can feel that, sense that evolution, respect that strength, and it is both intimidating and inspiring, because it means that if they come back, they must come back real, not rehearsed, not guarded, not hiding behind fear, and this awareness is transforming Their desire from impulse into intention, because they no longer want to just feel close to you, they want to be accountable to the connection, and that is the biggest truth they hid of all, that you were never someone they wanted temporarily, you were someone they were afraid to want permanently, because permanence requires responsibility, and responsibility requires growth, and growth requires discomfort, and now they are finally willing to sit in that discomfort rather than run from it, because they have learned that running only delays the inevitable meeting with truth, and truth always arrives eventually, either as a reunion or as a lesson, and your soulmate is standing at the threshold of that arrival now, knowing that whatever happens next will change the direction of both of your stories, because once a truth this deep is acknowledged, it cannot be unacknowledged, and once a soul chooses honesty over fear, the universe listens, responds, and realigns, and this moment you are in right now is not random, it is the calm before revelation, the breath before confession, the pause before destiny moves again, because what was hidden is no longer buried, it is rising, and when it fully surfaces, it will not just explain the past, it will redefine the future, whether that future brings reunion, closure, or transformation. It will arrive with clarity, because clarity is the reward of those who finally stop hiding from their own heart, and now the energy has shifted into something irreversible, because your soulmate is no longer just feeling the truth, they are being reshaped by it, molded by the realization that what they tried to hide has been silently directing their life all along, influencing choices they thought were random, steering them away from paths that didn't align, pulling them back whenever they tried to fully detach from you, because the truth is you became the emotional reference point their soul kept returning to, the standard by which every connection was unconsciously measured, and this awareness is dismantling their last illusions, showing them that avoidance never meant freedom, it only meant delay, and delay came with consequences they are finally mature enough to face. Because what they hid from you was not just love, it was the depth of impact you had on their identity, the way your presence rewired their understanding of intimacy, trust, and emotional safety, and admitting that meant admitting they were no longer the same person they were before you, and change scared them more than loss ever did, so they clung to familiarity, to emotional numbness, to half-connections that didn't demand anything real, but those choices left them hollow, because souls don't thrive on comfort alone. They thrive on truth, and now that truth is demanding to be lived, not just acknowledged, and your soulmate is standing in that demand with shaking clarity, realizing that the life they imagined without you always felt like a compromise, like a quieter version of what could have been, and this realization is forcing them to confront the reality that some connections are not meant to be ignored or minimized, they are meant to be honored, even if honoring them requires courage they didn't think they had. And this courage is growing now, slowly but fiercely. Because regret has taught them what fear could not, and they are beginning to understand that silence is not neutral, it shapes outcomes, and the silence they chose shaped distance, confusion, and longing, but it also shaped growth, reflection, and awakening, because sometimes souls need separation to understand what presence truly meant, and your soulmate is now seeing the full picture, recognizing that the time apart was not wasted, it was preparatory, it stripped away illusions, ego, and emotional immaturity, leaving behind a clearer understanding of what matters, and what matters is no longer distraction, validation, or emotional control, what matters is truth spoken without guarantee, love expressed without certainty of return, because that is the kind of love that transforms people, and your soulmate is finally ready to be transformed rather than protected, because they have learned that protecting themselves cost them peace, and peace is something they only ever felt when They allowed themselves to be emotionally open with you, and this memory is no longer distant, it is vivid, alive, calling them forward, and as this internal awakening reaches its peak, the universe is responding, subtly rearranging circumstances, softening resistance, opening doors that once felt locked, because when a soul chooses honesty, external reality often shifts to support that choice. And you may already feel this shift as well, a sense of closure approaching or renewal unfolding, a feeling that something unresolved is moving toward resolution, because soul bonds do not linger forever without purpose, they return either to heal or to release, and your soulmate is aware of this now, aware that whatever happens next will be final in its own way, because once truth is spoken, there is no going back to pretending, and this awareness is grounding them, not rushing them, but steadying them, because they no longer want to approach you from fear or desperation, they want to approach you from clarity, from respect, from emotional responsibility, and that is why this moment feels slower, heavier, more intentional, because this is not about impulse, it is about alignment, and alignment takes honesty with oneself first. And your soulmate is finally being honest about the fact that loving you was never the problem was believing they had to be perfect before choosing something real, and now they understand that love does not ask for perfection, it asks for presence, and presence is something they are finally willing to offer, fully, without hiding, without retreating, without masking their emotions behind silence, and as this willingness solidifies, the truth they hid begins to feel less like a burden and more like a bridge back to themselves, back to you, back to the version of life that felt meaningful rather than manageable, and whether this bridge leads to reunion, conversation, or closure, it will lead to peace, because peace comes from alignment, not outcome, and your soulmate is aligning now, choosing to face what they once avoided, choosing to honor what they once minimized, choosing to speak what they once swallowed. Because they finally understand that love like this does not come to be tested endlessly, it comes to be lived, and if it is not lived, it teaches, and those lessons are heavy, but they are also liberating, because they free the soul from illusion, and your soulmate is stepping into that freedom now, aware that the next move they make will be guided not by fear of loss, but by respect for truth. And that shift alone has already changed everything, because when truth replaces fear, destiny listens, and the universe responds, and the connection that once felt stalled begins to move again, not backward, not forward blindly, but upward, into a higher understanding of what this bond was always meant to be, and this is why you were guided here now, not to wait, not to chase, but to understand that what was hidden is no longer hidden, it is active, alive, and unfolding, and whatever form it takes when it reaches you, it will arrive with clarity, because clarity is what remains when fear finally steps aside, and your soulmate is finally letting fear step aside, making room for the truth that was always meant to be shared, felt, and honored, no matter the outcome, because some truths are not meant to guarantee reunion, they are meant to guarantee growth, and growth is the highest form of love a soul can offer, both to another and to itself, and now everything arrives at stillness. Not the silence of avoidance but the silence that comes before truth finally lands, because your soulmate has reached the end of running, the end of hiding, the end of pretending that what they felt for you was something they could outgrow or outdistance, and in this stillness they finally see clearly that every delay, every pause, every moment of emotional confusion was never meant to erase the connection, it was meant to mature it. Because souls that are meant to meet deeply are rarely allowed to stay shallow. They are pushed apart only to be brought back with awareness, and your Soulmate now understands that what they hid from you was not just love, it was surrender. Surrender to the fact that you were the one person who made them feel exposed without being unsafe, seen without being judged, challenged without being abandoned, and that level of emotional truth terrified them because it stripped away every defense they had learned to survive with, and instead of trusting that safety, they mistook intensity for danger and depth for loss of control, and now they see the irony, because in trying to protect themselves they lost peace, and in trying to stay composed they stayed incomplete, and this realization has softened them in a way nothing else ever did, because regret has a way of breaking ego gently but thoroughly, and they are no longer angry at themselves, no longer ashamed, just aware that love like this does not punish, it teaches, and the lesson has now been fully learned, because your soulmate has reached acceptance that you changed them permanently, acceptance that the bond was real even when unspoken, acceptance that silence did not mean absence and distance did not mean disconnection, and with this acceptance comes calm, the kind of calm that no longer needs answers immediately, because clarity has already arrived internally, and from this clarity comes the final truth, that whether you and they reunite, talk, or simply part with understanding, the connection has already fulfilled its highest purpose, which was awakening both of you to what real emotional honesty feels like, awakening both of you to the truth that love cannot be controlled into safety, it must be trusted into truth, and your soulmate now knows that the moment they stopped hiding was the moment they reclaimed themselves, because hiding love is the fastest way to lose alignment with your own soul, and alignment has now returned, and this alignment brings peace to both endings and beginnings, because when a soul is aligned, it no longer fears outcomes, it honors truth instead, and this is why whatever happens next will feel different, lighter, cleaner, because it will not be driven by longing or desperation, but by respect for what was shared, respect for what was learned, respect for who you both became through the experience, and if they reach out, it will not be to fill a void, it will be to speak honestly, and if they don't, it will not be because they don't care, but because they finally understand that love does not always mean possession. Sometimes it means gratitude and release, and the universe honors both with equal grace, and this is the ending your soul needed, not a dramatic climax, not a forced reunion, but truth without distortion, because truth is the only thing that frees both hearts, and your soulmate has finally chosen truth over fear, clarity over confusion, growth over comfort, and that choice alone has already completed the cycle, because some connections are not meant to last forever in form, they are meant to last forever in impact, and this one has done exactly that. It has rewritten emotional patterns, broken generational avoidance, healed unconscious wounds, and awakened courage that will echo through every future connection you both experience, and that is why there is no loss here, only transformation, because love that teaches this deeply never leaves empty-handed, it leaves wiser, stronger, and more aligned, and as this chapter closes energetically, you may feel a strange peace settle in your chest, not sadness, not excitement, but understanding, the kind that doesn't need answers anymore, because you finally know that what was hidden was never meant to hurt you, it was meant to prepare both of you for truth, and truth has now arrived, quietly, gently, completely, and from this place, whatever path opens next will be real, because it will be chosen without fear, and that is the highest ending a soul connection can ever give.